भुट्टो जिंदा है, कल भी भुट्टो जिंदा था, आज भी भुट्टो जिंदा है.
17 years ago today, one of the most powerful women of the Muslim world was taken from us far too soon.
I feel very proud, not for myself, but for women in Pakistan, women in the Muslim world, and indeed women all across the world, that we had broken a very important barrier and shown that women could reach the top.
I was a child then, but even as I grew up in a Pakistan without her, her presence was never entirely absent. You could feel it in the space that she made for women in politics and in the way that she became a cultural icon simply by how she carried herself. And in how through every trial and tribulation, she remained unapologetically true to herself and her womanhood. Perhaps the greatest gift Benazir Bhutto left for those who never had the chance to meet her personally is her autobiography. In it, she lays out her life with remarkable honesty and invites you to grow alongside her from her very first days at college eating peppermint stick ice cream cones at Harvard to becoming the president of the Oxford Union and still driving from Oxford to London in her sports car just to have that same peppermint ice cream at Baskin-Robbins. Somewhere along the way, you realize that she's just a girl, curious, driven, and deeply human. And there's something else that she's strikingly honest about too, the fact that she grew up knowing that she was always being watched. Born into one of Pakistan's most prominent political families, the public nature of her life was almost inherited. And yet, what's most compelling is that she never writes like someone intoxicated by privilege. She writes like someone acutely aware of the responsibility that comes with being seen, as well as the careful balance required to remain herself in a life that was never fully her own. And then there's the added element of being a woman, for whom being visible is never neutral. She writes, "I am especially sensitive to maintaining my composure, to never showing my feelings. A display of emotion by a woman in politics can be misconstrued as weakness." She knew that the rules were different for her, but instead of suppressing the fear, she faced it head on. Her education took her far from home, to Harvard and then Oxford. These were places where she found intellectual freedom, debate, curiosity. She says that it was at Harvard where she was allowed to be herself for the first time.
I spent 4 of the happiest years of my life as a student at Harvard University, and those days now seem like a dream to me.
And yet what's interesting is that she didn't bring back any of the arrogance. She brought back fluency. That fluency showed up everywhere. Did you know that before Benazir Bhutto became Prime Minister, she used to host a television talk show? It was called Encounter and it aired right here on Pakistan television. And maybe this detail is easy to miss because it doesn't fit neatly into the usual headlines about power and tragedy. But it tells you something essential about who she was, an intelligent woman who had a fondness for debate. She sat across from guests, asked questions, listened carefully, and argued politely. She had a command over the room without even trying to. In hindsight, it feels almost prophetic. Long before she stood at podiums or addressed parliaments, Benazir Bhutto was already doing what she would do all her life, engaging powerfully with ideas and people in a style that was unique to her. She was comfortable disagreeing and just as comfortable listening to a counterpoint of view. Later, people would say the same thing about her as Prime Minister. She argued firmly, but she argued politely. She impressed people not by volume, but by clarity. Dawn writes, Benazir Bhutto had an eloquent presence in the National Assembly reminiscent of her father, the Qaid-e-Awam. And she doesn't deny the privileges of being her father's daughter either. For example, she describes accompanying him to Shimla for a summit with Indira Gandhi. Her father wanted her there as a witness, as this meeting would be a turning point in Pakistan's history. And some of you must be thinking, well, of course he did. But I'm thinking, what was it like for a 19-year-old to be there? What was Indira Gandhi like? And that's exactly the insight Benazir gives us through her curious, observant, and witty mind. On the plane, her father warned her that even her expression would be read politically. As she recalls, he told her, "You must not smile. You must not look grim either. She writes almost with surprise about the crowds that gathered wherever she went in Simla, about journalists focusing on her clothes rather than negotiations unfolding behind closed doors. And then she goes on to observe Gandhi, how different she seemed in person, much smaller than she appeared in photographs, yet unmistakably elegant. She admits to admiring Gandhi's perseverance, how a woman dismissed as Gungi Guriya, a dumb doll in India, had outmaneuvered powerful men and emerged as a leader. At the same time, she sensed a certain coldness as well, a reserve that only softened occasionally when Gandhi smiled. And here's the thing about Benazir's life. One moment she's standing at the edge of history, watching power up close, and the next, almost without warning, that world disappears. Suddenly, after the best years of her life at Harvard and Oxford, her world shrank. After General Zia's military coup, Benazir Bhutto went from elite institutions and television studios to prison cells. She turned from Pinky to Bibi. And she writes about this transition without melodrama. She describes this searing heat which turned her cell into an oven. Sticky with sweat, I was often coated with grit. My skin split and peeled, coming off my hands in sheets. More boils erupted on my face. The sweat dripped into them, burning like acid. My hair, which had always been thick, began to come out by the handful. I had no mirror, but I could feel my scalp with my fingertips, damp, gritty, and naked. Every morning, I would find new clumps of hair on my pillow. She describes how she kept herself busy with exercise, even embroidery and knitting, that distracted her from wandering thoughts. She writes about isolation, about being cut off from books, conversation, sunlight, and most of all, her family. But even as she writes about isolation and illnesses that lingered long after her release, what stands out is not self-pity, it's restraint. She doesn't ask you to admire her suffering. She asks you to understand exactly how prison clarified her purpose. Nothing shaped Benazir Bhutto's life more than her father's execution, and she puts this devastation into simple words. They killed my father, and they killed democracy with him. This could have been the end of her story, but instead, she returned again and again to one belief. I had long ago made my choice. The people of Pakistan have always come first. When Benazir Bhutto finally became Prime Minister in 1988, the world focused on the headline, First Woman to Lead a Muslim-majority Country. But what mattered just as much was how she did it. She didn't neutralize her femininity. She didn't disguise it or apologize for it. She actually leaned into it. She writes, that election was the tipping point in the debate raging in the Muslim world on the role of women in Islam. It proved that a Muslim woman could be elected prime minister, could govern a country, and could be accepted as a leader by both men and women. I am grateful to the people of Pakistan for honoring me. And then she goes on to write, I do believe my career has been more challenging because I'm a woman. Clearly, it's not easy for women in modern society, no matter where we live. We still have to go the extra mile to prove that we are equal to men. We have to work longer hours and make more sacrifices, and we must emotionally protect ourselves from unfair, often vicious attacks made on us via the male members of our family. Sadly, many still believe that men control the women in their lives, and by pressuring the man, they will get him to pressure the woman. Nevertheless, we must be prepared not to complain about the double standards, but to overcome them. We must be prepared to do so even if it means working twice as hard and twice as long as a man. I am grateful to my mother for teaching me that pregnancy is a biological state of being which should not disrupt the normal routine of life. Trying to live up to her expectations, I almost ignored any hint of physical or emotional limitation during my pregnancies. Yet I was acutely conscious that what should have been a family matter became a topic of intense political discussion from military headquarters to editorial boards. Aware of this, I kept the exact details of my pregnancies confidential. She then went on to give birth to Bilawal while campaigning for elections, and then gave birth to her second child, Bakhtavar, while in office. She writes, I didn't want to encourage any stereotypes that pregnancy interferes with performance. So, despite my condition, I worked just as hard and probably a lot harder than a male prime minister would have. Especially for young women, it was a defining moment, proving that a woman could work and have a baby in the highest and most challenging leadership positions. The next day, I was back on the job, reading government papers and signing government files. Only later did I learn that I was the only head of government in recorded history to actually give birth while in office. That's one less glass ceiling for women prime ministers in the future to have to break. And here's an interesting addition to that. She visited the conflict-ridden Siachen sector and became the first prime minister on either side of the border to do so, all while pregnant as well. She understood that leadership, especially for a woman, is not just about authority, it's about legibility. She didn't masculinize herself to be taken seriously. She actually remained visibly and unmistakably herself. And that mattered because for the women watching her, she was bringing about a revolution without being loud and carved a seat for them in a space that repeatedly tried to banish her. According to the BBC, at the height of her popularity, she was one of the most high-profile women leaders in the world. Similarly, American Prospect described her, "To the West at large, she spoke the language of secular democracy. To American women, Bhutto spoke the language of feminism, filling a void left by the absence of a female American counterpart to mirror her ascent to power in Pakistan." That's right. We had a female prime minister before America had a female president, which, by the way, they still don't. And since we're talking about womanhood, I can't not talk about her style. Benazir Bhutto was not frivolous about fashion, she was deliberate. Her clothes spoke before she did. Flowing kameez, structured blazers, silk dupattas, modest, modern, elegant. She understood that appearance was part of political communication. A white dupatta always loosely frames her face, which she is often fixing. Black eyeliner defines her eyes. Her aesthetics, posture, and demeanor speak a tone of familiarity and recognition to her Pakistani audience. While in a comment published by the American Prospect, it is written, "She wore the dupatta in an acutely stylized and regal manner, always wide, loose, flowing, perched far enough back on her head to accent her high cheekbones and gleaming dark hair. It said, 'I am a woman.' It said, 'I am timeless.'" And that's exactly how she set the tone for what political fashion could be in Pakistan. Not flashy, not austere, but graceful. Her style had presence beyond vanity. She was the queen of plaid, chokers, and bows before any of us, but some of her most memorable looks were the unexpected ones, like this moon and stars kurta that she's seen wearing in an official meeting. Now, the thing with her autobiography is that it's filled with a lot of small human details that people often overlook. She's managed to preserve her memories in a way that, even if you disagree with her politics, you can't help but admire her courage or even just the honesty with which she's penned down her life. She writes about food that she enjoyed, about cooking when she could, about family life, domestic routines, and the comfort of ordinary moments amid political chaos, about bringing the wilted roses in her garden back to life as she was locked up in her house. And then she addresses a question that hangs above any woman's head. You've probably guessed it. The question of marriage. She once again honestly explains how complicated the idea of marriage had become for her. She writes that as a young woman, she imagined finding a partner the way many do, believing that she would fall in love and marry someone of her own choice. Her parents had also married for love, and she grew up assuming that marriage and ambition could exist side by side. As a student in America during the women's movement, she also believed that a woman could have it all: a meaningful career, a marriage, and children. But then she returned to Pakistan and entered politics. And then marriage began to feel impossible. How could she think about personal happiness when her father was in jail and his life was in danger? After his execution, grief pushed the idea even further away. And then came her own imprisonment. She writes plainly that marriage was definitely out of the question. Even after her release, she felt too tense, too unsettled to imagine sharing her life. She describes how conversation made her breathless, how noise startled her. She needed time to recover and to find herself again. And yet, alongside relentless political work, loneliness crept in. Her houses were large but often silent. Her siblings had families of their own. Slowly, she began to feel the absence of a home that belonged to her. It was in this space between duty and longing that she agreed to Asif Ali Zardari's proposal. her wedding became a public celebration with nearly 200,000 people in attendance. But marriage didn't change her commitment. It simply added another dimension to a life she never stopped choosing deliberately. She refused the idea that a woman must fragment herself to survive power. Benazir Bhutto never claimed that she dismantled patriarchy, but what she did do was far more pragmatic and in many ways more enduring. She built structures, women police stations so women could report crimes without fear, lady health workers bringing healthcare to women and children across Pakistan, the first women's bank expanding women's access to credit and economic life, women's quotas and appointments opening doors to governance and judiciary. And here's something that you probably didn't know. With the return of democracy in 1988, Pakistan saw the beginning of media liberalization. Satellite access expanded and private production increased, and the first private FM radio stations emerged. Those were the early signs of opening media space that later grew into full private channel licensing in the 2000s under Musharraf. And sure, it's important to acknowledge that many people don't agree with her politics. They question her lineage of feudalism and political dynasty. They point to corruption charges, to compromises, to failures. But what makes Benazir Bhutto's life so singular is that she spent far more time fighting than ruling. Her governments were brief, contested, and interrupted. She governed under constant pressure from institutions, from exile, and quite literally threat to her life. Much of her political life unfolded not in offices, but in opposition. And perhaps that's why her legacy is less about perfect governance and more about persistence and about simply holding space, especially as a woman. Years later in exile, Benazir Bhutto wrote another book. This one was different. Reconciliation, Islam, Democracy, and the West. This one wasn't about her life. It was actually about the future and specifically about Pakistan's future. She wrote, "I was convinced that the battles between democracy and dictatorship and between extremism and moderation were the two central forces of the new millennium." She rejected the idea that Islam and democracy were incompatible. She reminded readers that the first person to embrace Islam was a woman, that denying girls education violated the very first word of the Quran, which is read. She was taking a stand for the Muslim world in a post-9/11 era when Islamophobia was at its peak. This wasn't theoretical for her. Her life was the proof. And what's most moving about reconciliation is its tone. It isn't angry, and it's not even defensive. It's not bitter, even though it was conceived while she was in exile. It's hopeful. She believed coexistence was still possible, that reconciliation within societies and between them was not naive but necessary. She sent final edits of the book just hours before she was assassinated. And with that, she didn't leave behind a lament, but a vision. So you can disagree with Benazir Bhutto's politics and you can critique the dynasty that she came from. You can also debate her decisions as the Prime Minister. But it's hard to deny that despite everything, she never became smaller to survive power. She preserved her femininity as well as her power. She lived with grace amid danger and she wrote with honesty amid fear. She stayed even when leaving would have been far easier. At the end of the day, Benazir Bhutto's story isn't just about being the first woman to become a prime minister in the Muslim world. It's about being fully herself and refusing to disappear.